and welcome to today's webinar. HP and Vivit Worldwide Experts deliver amazing mobile apps with confidence now. Next slide, please. Today's webinar is brought to you by HP Software. Next slide, please. Today's webinar is hosted and moderated by Todd DeCapua. Todd DeCapua is the local user group leader for Vivit for multiple areas and cities. And he is also a special interest group leader for Vivit. Additionally, he is a senior software executive with HP Software. Next slide, please. Today's speakers are Todd Merritt, Richard Bishop, and Todd DeCapua. Todd Merritt is the Canada Testing Platform Director for Accenture. And Richard is the Head of Service Development and Delivery for Trust IV Limited. And Todd DeCapua is the Senior Software Executive again from HP Software. Next slide, please. Some housekeeping before we begin today's webinar. Today's live session is intended for all Vivit members. The recording will be posted in the webinar section on the Vivit website, visible for all Vivit members. Additionally, today's slide deck and webinar recording will be made available to you. We will send you the link via an email once the webinar recording and slide deck are posted to the Vivit website. So if you have questions as we go along today, please type and send them in using the questions pane in the webinar control panel. And I have a picture of this for you on the next slide. Here's the picture of the GoToWebinar control panel. And it usually appears in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. To submit a question, make sure the questions pane is expanded and type in your question and click on send. So we'll go ahead and get started, and I'll turn it over to Todd DeCapua.
Stephanie. Thank you, Stephanie, and welcome to everybody joining us here today, or if you're viewing the recording. The intent today is to cover, this is actually part 1 of 3. So first we're going to be talking about mobile, so delivering amazing apps with confidence now. Again, the unique thing here is HP is the sponsor. I've also brought 2 Vivit Worldwide Experts with us, with both Todd Merritt from Accenture and, of course, Richard Bishop from Trust IV. And as we get started in this topic, what we wanted to do is to start with a poll. So on the next slide, you will see polling question number 1, and you will shortly be prompted to submit your response. And what you'll see here is we're really interested to know what percentage of your development and testing effort is being spent on mobile. I know with several of the different organizations that we all get to work with, we see a varied percentage here. And again, we were interested in understanding what you're seeing in your environments, and maybe if you're a consultant, your customers' environments. So if you could please select one of these variables here. You can see the first one is 0 to 25, next is 25 to 50, then 50 to 75, and 75 to 100. And the last response is none. We do not do mobile. So I don't think there's going to be many organizations like that out there, but if you could please select one, that would be great, and then Stephanie will display the results here for us momentarily. So as you can see, the results are quite overwhelming, with 0 to 25% of the responses coming back at 80%. So I don't know if Richard or Merritt, if you wanted to provide any insights as to maybe why we were seeing such a high percentage of respondents, actually quite low, I would think, from 0 to 25% of their effort being spent on mobile and development and test.
I think one of the reasons why we might see those sort of figures is because a lot of respondents who are involved in Vivit and are users of the software may well come from the very large organizations, many of whom are perhaps a little bit slower to move and respond to an emerging trend such as mobile application development or testing. I know some people that I've worked for, very large organizations like banks, for example, they tend not to be first to market with adopting new technologies. They tend to be a little bit more conservative in their approach, and so it may well be some reflection of that. It'd be interesting to see how our users, our members stack up and which sort of organization they come from, but that was one thought I had.
It's a great perspective, and Todd Merritt, maybe we'll get you to comment first on the next poll. As we move to the next slide here, you can see that what myself, Richard, and Todd Merritt are going to be covering are three different facets of mobile. And really the intent here is to enable you to take these key learnings that we've had and enable you to deliver amazing apps with confidence. So what we're going to do is each of us are going to cover kind of a story or maybe what we've seen that's gone on in the past, and then also share where we are seeing things happening presently, and then also as we would look into the future and maybe a little bit of the crystal ball of what both Todd and Richard and myself are seeing today. So to get started, I will be covering what I've called a tipping point for application delivery. So again, this is a look into the past, and the reason being is this is a slide that we've used often kind of back in the 2010 to 2012. So, mobile is not new. However, as Richard was suggesting, there's definitely organizations that are a little bit hesitant to go onto the bleeding edge. I do feel like in our present day, this is almost a requirement. But what you can see here is, looking back into the past, there was this forecast of surging numbers, and they're still forecasting in 2016 this total global mobile application revenue will reach somewhere in that $46 billion number. So again, fairly significant number. I'm sure you are well aware of what this means for you and also for your organization. So you can see, again, historically, having 4 releases per year per application was kind of what the normal was. As we would look into, I would say, current day, a little bit into the future, you can see it's about 36 per year. And then, of course, in 2020, they're forecasting 120 per year. Again, number of releases deployed out to production per year. So a lot of different bullets here, as you can see, as to what we can expect. I guess me living through this as a practitioner, I would say this has come to be true and is very realistic of what I've seen happen in the past. I know that, Richard, you were next going to cover a little bit on this mobile data explosion that we've all seen. But before we go there, I mean, is there anything else that you'd want to highlight on this kind of past reflection?
Yeah, I think what you're saying is exactly right. Large organizations I've worked for in the past have gone based on quarterly application releases, unless there's maybe some legislative change or some quick fix to a problem that they need to get into a production system. So four releases per app per year is definitely a figure that I'm familiar with. I think the trend moving up to, as you say, 36 per app by next year, that might be a little ambitious for some of the more conservative larger organizations, but the trend's definitely happening because I'm certainly seeing more overlapping releases. So the traditional 4 is definitely becoming 6 or 8. So although there may be a lag in some sectors, that trend's definitely happening in my experience. Yeah, getting on to my slide, I think one of the biggest things that is changing people's use of applications is mobile data use. Obviously, there's been a huge proliferation of handsets. If you look at the original iPhone release in 2007, 2009, the 3GS came out, and beyond at that point, there's been since then, there's been a real explosion in mobile data use. Obviously, Apple may well have been a trendsetter then, but there's been a proliferation of low-cost smartphones since those initial mass-market devices, and obviously the network carriers, 3 and 4G networks, that those are proliferating, and there's been some very significant increases in the amount of mobile traffic on networks. The graph in the bottom right-hand corner is from an AT&T presentation going back as far as 2009, but they were reporting a 5,000% increase in just 3 years in mobile data on their networks, and that's a trend that's worldwide. It's not just AT&T. So if you look at the curves on just about all of those graphs, you're looking at exponential growth rates, and they're showing no signs of slowing. One trend that I think is happening within the mobile marketplace is people aren't necessarily efficient in how they use all the extra bandwidth that's available. Developers who are developing applications are aware that 4G is becoming more common, and so they just bloat their applications and get more images and so on. So bandwidth is used as quickly as it becomes available. The graph in the top right shows that. That's a trend line showing the projected increase in mobile video traffic. Obviously, that's not something that was in many people's minds, in 2001 when that chart starts on the left-hand side showing data traffic from handsets, but it gives you an idea of the sort of changes that are happening with mobile applications. In doing some research and reading around this, I've read a lot of information from Tam Everts, who blogs prolifically and talks about these sort of web performance issues on a site called Web Performance Today. One of the reports that she's written, which we can share a link to when we follow this up with an email, is that the trends show that they back up what I said earlier. Really, was that the pages are getting bigger, and today the average page served to a mobile device is 60% bigger than it was only 3 years ago. People are using custom fonts, larger images, and all these things are having an impact on mobile performance, which is why it's so important to test mobile applications correctly. It's over to you now, Todd. I don't know if you want to comment on my slide or go straight into yours.
No, I mean, I think, Richard, the perspectives that you're sharing, we're seeing across our clients, right? I mean, we're seeing bigger applications consuming more data across multiple platforms, and the associated challenges with developing and trying to test on these platforms. So on my slide here, looking across, the recent past, because, quite honestly, a lot of our clients, and I'm sure the organizations that you're working with are probably experiencing these challenges right up to now. But from a development and test perspective, the main ones that we're seeing as issues in our clients are, first of all, investing and maintaining dedicated test environments and tools aligned to mobile. I think a lot of companies are not fully up to speed and aware of some of the software tools that are out there to support testing on mobile infrastructure and devices. Definitely the pace of change in the device market itself and how do we test for that has been identified as a key area. So, even since this report has been published, we've seen OSs like Windows Mobile gain a little bit of traction. We've seen at least 2 iterations of Android for phones and tablets, as well as, the introduction of a few new mobile OSs that companies are developing on, and quite frankly, managing that pace of change is very difficult. When we look at things that are a little bit more specific to testing, I think the overall approach to testing mobile applications is something that people are struggling with. Often we see people doing their testing as part of a UAT or a business introduction testing, and you know, often that's not the right place to be doing our mobile testing. And then on the other end, we have people doing unit testing, sometimes in an agile development methodology, you know, and doing a lot of their application testing at that level, but not necessarily from an end-to-end point of view. When we ask our clients what are they looking for from their development and testing partners going forward, you know, I think experience in testing is the number one. So that's what I read when I see strong project management skills, as well as experience with tools and the ability to develop a test strategy that includes some pretty robust automation. Clients are looking at mobile device testing and seeing that this is a good chance to do some automation. Typically the scenarios are not that complex compared to big, beefy enterprise applications, so they're looking for ways to automate that, and that's tied to the execution as well. And I would say, you know, the tools question continues to burn for our clients. You know, how do we simulate these devices? You know, there's 10,000 phones and tablets out there. How do we set up environments where we can emulate these sort of things? How can we set up test environments that are changing constantly, back to Richard's point. So, you know, this is definitely on the radar of CIOs and, you know, the people that are responsible for the mobile applications that we're talking to. And, you know, as we look to the present and moving forward, they're really looking for experience, people, skills, and tools to support doing this. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about that in the next section.
Great, Todd. Thanks for covering that past and looking at what some of those mobile testing challenges are that you guys have observed as well. Our second of 3 polling questions. So this one, unlike the first, you can select as many as you would like or as many as you think apply. And it's interesting because I was watching some of the questions that came through specifically from Bill. And you know, his point was that, you know, engaging in developing these automation for mobile requires significant capital, and he's speculating that, you know, companies today are reducing this capital spend in favor of the bottom line and delaying that investment. So it's I think appropriate that we take a look at this question. So when done right, what is the impact of mobile to your business? As again, we're all living in this, you know, figuring out where the right place is to make the investments. But how is it that when done right, the impact of mobile to the business will help you to increase revenue, increase customer acquisition, increase the market share of the organization, increase your brand value, and then also increasing the share value. So again, check as many of these as you think apply. Maybe there's only a few that your organization thinks about, but I think as we look to, you know, what is it that you're seeing in your organizations today, and what does that impact look like? So from the results that you can see here, it looks like many people did select many. From the results, I'd say the top 4 are maybe the ones of focus. We can see that increased revenue and increased market share are probably the 2 highest that were selected. And I think this is fairly consistent with maybe what I would have hypothesized on. I don't know if Todd Merritt, you have any other thoughts on this poll results?
Yeah, Todd, I mean, this is definitely aligns with the priorities of, you know, a lot of the folks out there investing and funding this work. A big part of it is, you know, reaching out to new markets, using mobile apps to get an international brand or enter an international market segment. We see that a lot. Increased revenue, you know, I think that for a lot of clients increasing revenue or maintaining that revenue stream or defending revenue from other players in the market might be one way to interpret that as well.
Excellent. So next we're going to look into present. So what is it that seeing as we all look to, how can we deliver amazing mobile apps with confidence now? And in the present, I guess there's one area that I wanted to highlight, just because whether I'm, in a plane, in a train, or in a taxi cab, or standing in a forum of customers or prospects, it seems like this is all the buzz right now. How is it that we can have this continuous mobile app circle line? And, what are all the important pieces along the way? And you can see at the top, this is starting with user stories, and we talk about, designing this application or maybe the next iteration of that application. How do we quickly do our development or unit testing, bring in the security testing? Are we able to form some sort of design test plan to go with it? Are they practical to automate or not? What are some of those constraints? How do we run our performance tests and have that built in continuously? Then being able to move that out to the App Store, being able to do different type of monitoring in the field with that app, and then our back-end infrastructure and how are we monitoring those capabilities, and all of this coming full circle then within development, within testing. Maybe they're an integrated dev test team. You also have your ops teams. How is it that all of this works together in this continuous mobile app circle line? So this is one view that I've used and that we've used at HP to help kind of facilitate that conversation. And this is a very relevant present conversation that's going on. And again, helping to answer that question of how can you deliver amazing mobile apps with confidence right now. Richard, I'm going to hand it to you. I don't know if you've bumped into the same type of conversation as well. I know you're going to cover a little bit on some mobile web growth numbers that are quite compelling also.
Yeah, I think that the circle that you've got there to discuss the things that impact mobile application development are all extremely relevant. In particular, for me, I come from a testing background, so it's the performance testing element of that, but also the things around designing tests and how practical it actually is to automate mobile tests. I think I've worked in an organization in the past where the mobile test team was basically a group of about 10 or 15 people, all with mobile phones, keying things in manually, and I think that's still the case for a lot of people who test mobile applications, and I think that automating that and making it more straightforward is obviously key to doing it well and making your tests as repeatable as possible. Not that there isn't a place for some manual testing as well. But yeah, in terms of the present, the slide that I put in for this was really around mobile web growth, and I think the comment you made a little earlier, where you said planes, trains, and taxi cabs is particularly relevant for this slide. Mobile application use is ubiquitous. Some of the stats there, I'm not going to read them all out, but a lot of people are using mobile devices while watching television. People aren't embarrassed to use them anywhere, as that stat there that says 75% aren't ashamed to use them in a public restroom. People use them for research in conversations and so on. I saw some interesting stats from that infographic that I found. There are now more mobile devices on Earth than people, which I think is quite remarkable, and they're used across all demographics. So it's all market sectors, children, adults, and everything in between, I was going to say. A lot of people are also using mobiles as their primary method of going online. There's still a lot of people spending time in apps. I don't think there's that much growth yet in the newer HTML formats and so on. I think a lot of app development is still mobile rather than pure web, and people are spending significantly more time on mobile devices than they ever have. That exponential growth I mentioned in some of my earlier charts is happening in terms of application use as well. One statistic that I saw is people are spending on average 1.8 hours a day on their mobile device against 1.5 hours watching TV, which used to be a main use of leisure time. But I think people are also doing more things at once, and I think mobile is very much start of that trend. And I think one of the disruptors is that last statistic on the left-hand side, that 21% of people use mobiles while shopping, and that's because they're looking up competitor prices if they're in a shop, or they're looking for the nearest shop, for example. And so I think all of these are very disruptive technologies, and we're right in the middle of that disruption at the moment. I'm moving over to you, Todd 2, should I say?
Thanks, Richard. So, what I wanted to highlight on this slide is how we are helping, and a fairly common example of how a medium to large size organization is approaching mobile testing. And there's a couple of key themes that I'll pull out on the slide. So, in this specific example, we're talking about a big North American bank struggling to do a broad range of testing cycles against their mobile applications, and looking for some help to do this across the key applications. So, I guess the first point of this slide, is that establishing and investing in a mobile development and testing lab and environment is a key feature of our client solutions in this area. Really what this gets down to is robust environment management, targeting the right tools, especially for automation, and making sure that we're building that in from the initial stages of our development. The second key point here is actually, the importance of using a framework that's customized for mobile testing. So at Accenture, we have developed a framework. You can all take a look at it online, called the ROSA framework, which is basically building test scenarios and an organization built around remote access, offshore testing from different geographical locations, using simulated networks and environments, and as well as a heavy reliance on automation to the actual test executions. And the result for our clients is we're usually targeting over 50% test automation for mobile device testing, and so that's a good number to have. In this particular case, our client was making some large investments in their mobile test factory, and we were able to hit a little bit above that mark. So that's really a look at how our, a pretty common example of how organizations are starting to react to testing, trying to build a specialized team supported by environments that are, easy to provision, sometimes cloud hosted, as well as identifying the right tools and processes to use to do robust testing. I think we'll move to the polling question now.
That's great, Todd. Thank you. And this will be our final polling question. You can see it's kind of, now that we've seen the way that a lot of people are presently doing this, what about when it's done poorly? What's the impact of mobile to your business? Again, things like loss of revenue, loss of customers, loss of market share, loss of brand value, loss of shareholder value, all seemingly very important things. Please select as many as you see that apply. But you can see a lot of the present aspects that we just walked through. So, from Todd Merritt sharing, here's a large U.S.-based bank, here's the practice that they've invested in, some of the business challenges, what their role has been, and how they're now able to deliver these high-performance results, along with what Richard had highlighted just around all the ways that people are using mobile today, interacting with the devices. It's probably more relevant than ever that this brand value I know when I go out to an app store and I look at bringing or downloading an app for the first time, I often will look at the reviews and say, well, what are other people saying about this before I download it? So again, please take a minute and we will look at the results. So let's see here. As I do my analysis, it looks pretty strong across the board, but really the first two are probably the leads, the loss of revenue and loss of customers. I guess my only reflection on that is those are probably two very immediate results that are tracked real time nearly with every organization that I've worked with. In the interest of time, how about we move ahead to talk a little bit about the future and what some of the things are that we see that are coming. So, as we transition into the future piece here, what I wanted to provide is, we're seeing a lot in Agile, we're seeing a lot in speed to market, we're seeing a lot in the varied devices. For me, one of the big questions I always like to ask is, what is your definition of fully tested? Speed to market is absolutely important. Ensuring you get the highest value feature function to your customers is very important. Quality, I believe, is also equally important to the other two. So on the left-hand side, you can see some of these mobile testing disciplines that some of the bits that Todd Merritt had covered definitely talks to. A little bit in that mobile app circle line that I shared also covers. But as you kind of go from those disciplines to then looking at, well, how do we actually do this? What is the practical implementation of that? You can see this triangle starting with unit tests going all the way up to exploratory and maybe some other tests. So what you want to be able to do is do as much of the fully automated tests lower in the triangle. So again, that's why the base is wider, and then as you move up, this is where you want to do less and less of the automated and more of the manual execution. Again, much of this is going to be defined as exploratory testing, which is, hand me the device or let me sit down behind the keyboard, and I'll go ahead and just kind of run through a number of different flows, but not following any specific scripts. And then lastly, there's going to be some tests that are simply not practical to automate for a number of different reasons. But the definition of fully tested, or another way said within many Agile shops, is, what is the definition of done? So having those doneness criteria being a key important aspect as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Richard. I know you've got some pretty fun comments for what you're seeing in the future, but actually based on a lot of what we're seeing presently in some early stage development.
Yeah, my future gazing is really looking at future trend, which I think is basically more mobility. I think what you were saying on your slide is it's definitely true. It's important to automate. You should test sooner and more often, and that's true for all devices or all applications, but I think it's particularly true for mobile, because I think people who are using a mobile app want information and they want it quickly, and they're less likely to wait or be patient than users sitting at a PC. Because they're mobile and they're out and about, they want results and information more quickly. Yeah, in terms of a future trend that I think will continue to drive the current growth in mobile applications is potentially things like driverless cars. You were talking about people using devices everywhere. Well, one place where they can't use them at the moment is in their car when they're driving into work. Google obviously has got this well-publicized and well-known project to create the driverless car, and they state a number of reasons why they're investing in this technology. They want to reduce traffic accidents, which they estimate they can do by 90%, reduce the number of cars on the roads, reduce wasted commute time and energy, and there's a lot of reasons why that's potentially good for society. You're saving thousands of lives per year and potentially billions of dollars. But one key driver for this, there's no real pun intended with the use of the word driver, is getting more people tapping on their tablets and phones whilst commuting to work. I did some calculations on this, and I got some statistics from the US Department of Transportation because they were quite readily available, and obviously that's a key market for Google. There's around 130 million commuters in the US, and about 80% of those drive to work on their own. So that's about 97 million people commuting on a regular basis, and the average journey is around 25 minutes each way, but that grows in big cities where potentially consumer spending is higher. So more than half of drivers are commuting for an hour or more in each direction, and so more than half of 97 million commuters is around 100 million hours a day spent driving cars. So even if only half of those people start using the internet whilst they're traveling around, then that's going to be a potentially significant driver to make more people use more mobile applications. And obviously that's one thing that Google are keen on, because it represents revenue for them. But it's not just for them, it's anybody who has a mobile application. The audiences for these applications are inevitably going to increase rapidly, and so that exponential curve that I showed in the earlier two charts that I showed on my slides is it's showing no sign of flattening off, and I think that that's going to be one of the biggest game changers for the future, particularly with mobile applications. It's over to you, Todd, for your slide.
Thanks, Richard. Yeah, again, back on that point of future gazing and identifying some of the future trends that we're seeing. You know, the companies that we're working with are still enabling their mobile test capabilities, and you know, the recommendations that we're making you know, fall along three major themes. One, you know, the testing specific processes that we've always used to do our work need to have a focus on mobile. So test planning, you know, identifying the right scenarios, more of a focus on maybe technical testing and performance testing than some applications are used to, certainly backed up by some of the good networking tools that are out there. Second piece would really be around isolating and managing all of the device infrastructure needed to do the testing. So looking at creating device and OS profiles that are able to emulate and using test automation to do that, as well as making investments in the test infrastructure and the software that backs that up, quite frankly. You know, there are a number of tools out there. Some have a cost, some don't have much of a cost, but there's definitely a whole generation of mobile testing tools that are out there that need to be incorporated or taken a look at. Certainly the ones that integrate with the larger packages and work together is something that our clients are insisting on, since they're not going to wipe out all of their current test infrastructure environments. And, you know, back to one of the points we made at the very beginning, you know, developing and implementing and sustaining a process of doing regression testing, you know, either be an agile or a rapid waterfall. Organizations need to have this focus on, you know, keeping up with the release schedule, and that's what we see as the key to sort of enabling this going forward. I think that's it.
Excellent. These are all great future points, and I know that Todd Merritt, as you were going through those, you know, I'm looking at just, I mean, there's huge trends that we're talking about. You know, whether it's what is this definition of done, or if it's the idea, Richard, and I loved how you tied additional revenue into, you know, the number of people commuting just within the United States, where they could be browsing, they could be shopping, they could be doing a number of different things, but that really putting a financial model behind why this future of mobility around driverless cars is significant. And then Merritt, as I'm looking at this, thinking about what is this from a test perspective, a domain perspective, and also a device perspective. So wanted to transition now into some questions. We've gotten a handful that have come in via the question piece within the webinar. If you haven't submitted one yet, please do so. I'm going to pull a handful of them out here. The first one looks like it'd probably be most appropriate for you, Richard. I know that you've touched on this maybe a little bit, but what is it that you see as the next big thing for mobile?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the trends that we've currently seen are just going to continue, and I think the piece that I talked about, the driverless cars, is going to be a disruptor in more than just one way. I saw one statistic that said Google is forecasting $1.7 billion in increased advertising revenue from people commuting that currently aren't on the internet. So that's a huge potential disruptor for the marketplace as a whole, not just for Google. But I saw an article by a chap called Chunka Muai, or I'm not quite sure how to pronounce his name. It was a series of articles written for Forbes, and it was saying lots of places where you may find these sorts of disruptive changes in technologies having an impact. One place was talking specifically about driverless cars and saying it's going to be less fine income for governments because people won't be speeding because they won't be in control. Potentially less road building required because there's more efficient use of roads, fewer accidents, which obviously costs a significant amount. But it may also have the side effect of less personal injury claims, potentially no drunk driving, and so on. So those are all potentially good things, but one that I was very surprised at was a study that said that a 2-mile taxi journey across New York costs between $8 and $13 depending on traffic. And the calculations say that 9,000 cars could replace the entire fleet of New York yellow taxis, and average costs for a journey would be between 80 cents and $1 for a 2-mile trip. So that's a tenfold fall in prices. And so I think there's a lot of markets where these disruptive technologies are going to make very dramatic changes, and I'm not sure everybody really knows the full impact of how these things are going to change. I think it's an interesting time, and as testers and software developers, we need to be aware of the fact that these changes are coming and embrace them.
Wow, that's pretty compelling stuff, Richard, that I didn't even know about. That, I mean, just the advertising revenue opportunity for Google alone at $1.7 billion, I think you said. And the other one is the journey across New York City for 80 cents to $1. I mean, that, sign me up today. So that's pretty impressive. So yeah, hopefully.
Well, there's lots of apps like that. There's I don't know how ubiquitous Uber is, but it's owned by Google, and it's a taxi booking application. I know that we can get it in cities in the UK as well as abroad. So these things are already happening, and these things all need testing, and they all need work. So the change is happening now, even if we're not fully tuned into it and fully aware of it.
No, that's great stuff, and thank you, Richard. I guess Todd Merritt, another one that came in here. How is Accenture positioning in the market with HP? Is that something you're okay in talking a little bit about?
Sure, I can talk a little bit about that. So, obviously, we work with all software vendors based on our clients' requirements. I should state that up front. However, we partner with HP for a very large number of our engagements. The investments that our clients have made in ALM as well as BBC and some of the other tools and some of the emerging mobile tools, is something that we need to support. And where we're seeing a lot of interest in this alliance, probably the largest I see has to do with cloud-based testing solutions, leveraging the HP tools that a lot of our clients currently have. And, HP has a great offering in this space, and we augment where we can and even use infrastructure to support some of the other tools that are out there.
And I guess, Todd, while you're speaking, one of the other questions that's come in here, and this is related to the slide that you covered back when you were talking about present. So this would be the U.S.-based bank. The question that came in was, what percentage of testing was on real devices, and what percent of them was automated tests? Also, was emulators or simulators used during the test cycle?
Yep.
There's a lot
great
there.
question. Great question. It sounds like this is coming from a real-world practitioner trying to make sense of testing in this space. So I'll do a different twist on this. We use real devices for all cycles of the testing that we're doing on mobile. So if I put them in the specific compartments, I would say functional testing, UAT testing, regression testing. We're always having to do at least part of that using real devices. For the straight up functional testing, we do rely on a lot of emulation and automation to do that. Confirming business flows, workflows, that sorts of things. Those are great candidates for automated testing. Where we see having to get very tactical on the ground has to do with, really the performance and the network and the security side of things. And I've seen clients, ship boxes of devices overseas, and they spend 2 weeks in one country and move around. So we see all kinds of things. Now, the good thing is that there are some great tools out there, and I will give credit to the Shunra tool, which is a newly acquired HP software offering. What that tool is able to accomplish on the network side, allowing for a lot more automation there, is saving our clients a lot of time and headache on the network side. So going back to the question, what percentage of the testing was on real devices? I would say, for all of the different test execution cycles, probably maybe 10%. What percentage was automated? As much as possible. Hopefully everything up to that can be automated. And yes, we would definitely leverage emulators and simulators across the board through all phases of testing.
Great, thank you, Todd. I guess as an HP employee, I guess I would be remiss if I didn't take kind of what Merritt was saying around the Shunra piece. So for those of you who don't know, Shunra was acquired by HP on the 1st of April 2014. It is now known as HP Network Virtualization, and you can learn a lot more about it if you go to hp.com/go/nv. But again, not meant to be a plug, just clarity of, if you're looking for Shunra out on the internet, you may not find it right now. It's because of the new name after the acquisition by HP. So I guess we probably have time for one more question here before Stephanie is going to steal it away and wrap it up for us. So another one that came in is, what is HP doing new in mobile? One piece I can talk about, another part I probably can't talk about, but I'll give you a little bit more details on that one. So first is going to be something that was released, I believe it was last week, called Storm Runner Load. And if you do want to check out more on what that is and be able to go in and use it, you can go out to pronq.com. So it's PRONQ.com. And out there you will find a number of key products and capabilities that are offered in a way to make it easy for you to try them and gain easy and early access to these products. Storm Runner Load gives you the ability to very quickly create your own test scenario and then run load tests from the cloud. So this relating to mobile in the way that if you have a mobile website or other system that you could access publicly, you could actually run cloud-based load and performance tests from Storm Runner Load. The second one that I cannot go into too much detail on is one that's going to be released very soon called Mobile Center. There's a lot more that I could share with you. However, I know that we have an exclusive sneak peek of HP Mobile Center during the Vivit Mobility Virtual Summit on October the 8th. So if you haven't signed up for that one yet, I know that you can go out to the Vivit Worldwide website and search for it. Again, it's coming up here on October the 8th, and that will be just for the Vivit community to give you guys a sneak peek into these capabilities and what it's going to mean. But it will be a very significant announcement, and one that for all the bits that we've talked about today, relevant for all of us on the phone. So Stephanie, with that, I think we're going to wrap up the Q&A section, and we'll hand it back over to you to go ahead and wrap up this webinar. I also wanted to just say a special thanks to both Richard and Todd for joining us today and participating in this HP-sponsored webinar.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Stephanie, you're muted.
Okay, great. Sorry, I was talking to myself. As Richard, thanks Richard for moving the slides for me. As Todd mentioned, don't forget to register for the upcoming Vivit Mobility Virtual Summit on October 8th. And the registration link is shown here on the slide. And then on December 2nd through the 4th is HP Discover in Barcelona. And if you'd like to attend that, be sure to register at the link below as well on this slide. So next slide, Richard. Great. And be sure to visit the IT experts community on it's the HP IT experts community. You can look at their forums, blogs, and upcoming events and register for the monthly newsletter. There's a lot of good information there, and the link is here on this page as well, hyperlinked into IT experts community, so you can sign up. And then there's some online expert days coming up, and be sure to look into those, participate in them. Lots of good information there on all the different HP software tools. Next slide.
Yeah, sorry, Stephanie. Sorry to interrupt, but you mentioned those links there. I'm not sure how easy it's going to be for people to click those, but I know that we're going to send a follow-up email out, and there's a few links to articles and things that I mentioned that may be relevant to people. So if we can follow that up with an email, I think that would be useful to give people access to each of those links. So I can send you the information I need to send out if that's useful to you.
Wonderful, yes. And you guys will receive the link to the slide deck and the webinar recording, and we can put those links on the page where those are located. So when the follow-up email comes out, it'll all be in one spot for you. So it's a great idea, Richard. Thank you. So just be sure to complete the short survey following the webinar today. And if you opt in to hear more information from HP, you'll be automatically entered in to win a chance. Entered in to win a $100 Amazon gift card. And be sure to check us out at Vivit Worldwide and, of course, at HP.com for more information. And then if you have questions for Todd, he's left his email address here too, td@hp.com. So again, look for an email in the next few days with the link to the webinar recording and slide deck. And we're so glad that you all could attend today. Todd and Richard, thank you all for a wonderful presentation today. We really appreciate it. And I hope you guys all have a wonderful rest of your day or afternoon or evening, wherever you are. Thank you all.
Thank you.